Hello, folks. How are you? And Vice, that's me. I'm here. And today we're going to be talking about Linkerd and Meshery. How to use Meshery to deploy Linkerd. How to use Linkerd with Meshery. So both logos of Meshery on the left and of Linkerd on the right are here on the screen. And even from this picture, you can see that these two make a perfect pair. Even the color palettes match. But what are they? Before we talk about what they are, we'll have to talk about what a service mesh is, because this whole video will be about service meshes. So what is a service mesh? Do you know what a service mesh is? I'll tell you what I think it is. So as Christian Posta, the evangelist for the Solo IO company, says, the moment you've broken down your application into a myriad of small services, and the moment you've deployed those services on your cloud platform, you invariably already get a service mesh. The multitude of communications, transactions, network connections between your services is what forms this mesh. But what do we mean when we say that service mesh is a technology? Well, service mesh is this new exciting tech that allows us to take this multitude of communications between our services and to be able to analyze and control this network traffic. So how is this being made available? Well, the service mesh consists of two main parts, the data plane and the control plane. The first part is what allows us to capture the traffic, and that's the data plane, the upper part of our diagram. Capturing the traffic is being enabled by a mesh or a network of small lightweight proxies, whereas each proxy resides next to each one of our services. In Kubernetes, this will be a sidecar container inside each one of our pods. Now, what this proxy does is it intercepts all of the network traffic going into our pod and going on out of our pod. And by intercepting that traffic, it makes it available, makes it analyzable and controllable with the help of the lower part of our diagram, namely the service mesh control plane. Service mesh control plane is the brain of the mesh. It allows us centralized control of the mesh, and it usually will be consisting of such components as, well, some kind of a control interface, which would be a user interface and command line interface, or an API. And we usually will expect some components dedicated to the observability of the network traffic inside the mesh, so we can observe what happens with the traffic. And there will be some kind of a policy engine here that defines what kind of traffic is allowed and what kind of traffic is prohibited in the mesh, and maybe what and how we want to shape the traffic according to which rules and what policies do we want to shape the traffic that occurs among our services. And finally, when there's so much traffic and so much data transactions between our services in the cluster, we do want all of this traffic to be secure, to be encrypted. And how do we do that? That's not that easy to allow our services to communicate securely. In order to make this easier, we do expect the service mesh to provide us some kind of a mutual TLS solution, and that's again what most service meshes do. Now, after we define what service meshes are, let's see how and what is Linkerd. But before that, let's talk about Meshery. So what is Meshery? Meshery is a project developed by a service mesh community named Layer 5, which I'm proud to be a part of. What is Layer 5? Well, Layer 5 is a service mesh community where we study service meshes, where we talk about service meshes, where we promote service meshes. We even have service mesh parties and service mesh concerts where we all get crazy in the service mesh pit. No, that's not actually what it is about. So yeah, service mesh is a community, no, layer 5 is a service mesh community that's dedicated to three main goals. First of all, is creating the service mesh landscape so that any organization or any individual interested in evaluating, in deploying service mesh can go to that landscape, study the landscape, understand what it's all about, what different meshes are about, what different solutions on the market are about, what each one of them provides. Now, in order to study that and in order to provide actual tools for playing with service meshes, we're building software, and that would be Meshery, the project that we will be looking at today. Meshery is a unified management plane for all of the leading service meshes on the market today. And by being that management plane, it actually becomes a playground for different service meshes. And it allows us to not only install and configure service meshes, it also allows us to run performance benchmarks on these meshes. And that would be the third goal of layer 5, the community. And that's defining the service mesh performance benchmark specification. And by the way of using Meshery, running these performance benchmarks and publishing their results online. And finally, what is Linkerd? Well, Linkerd is one of those service meshes that we study and develop at layer 5. So what is Linkerd? Actually, we're talking about the project called Linkerd 2.0, and it comes from the service mesh pioneers. It's elder brother, the Linkerd, the original Linkerd, was developed by the guys at a company, the folks at the company named Linkerd, and they were actually the ones who coined the term service mesh. Nobody was talking about service meshes before them. Now, specifically, Linkerd 2.0 is a service mesh directed only at Kubernetes, unlike other service meshes that talk about being able to deploy the mesh not only in Kubernetes, but also outside of the cluster. Linkerd is for Kubernetes only, and that's why it's probably the best service mesh for Kubernetes. It uses the specially developed sidecar proxy called Linkerd, which is written in Rust, one of the most exciting modern programming languages, also very performant. It employs the approach of minimum configuration. That means once you have Linkerd, once you have it deployed, you already start getting value out of it. It has telemetry built in. It's known for its high performance, again, compared to other service meshes on the market, especially Istio, and it's known for its operational simplicity. Now that we've talked about all of this, without further ado, let's go to the practical part. Let's install Meshery, let's install Linkerd with Meshery and see how they all play together nicely. So the first thing that we're going to do is installing Meshery. If you're on a Mac, as I am, you can, of course, always install Meshery with the help of Brew, the wonderful package manager for macOS. So you can just go brew install Meshery, but we won't be doing that today. Instead, we'll use the Linux approach, which works on Linux and on Mac as well, because I'm aware of the fact that not all of you out there are using Macs for your work. So we'll use curl pipe to bash, which is of course not a very secure option. But again, if you're writing this on your own computer, if you're only using this for evaluation on your testing environment, that's perfectly okay. Nothing to be afraid of. So that's where we'll be bringing our Meshery installation script from. Let's see how this works. So this command downloads everything needed for Meshery, all of the Meshery components, and also the wonderful Meshery command line utility, the Meshery CTL that we'll see in a moment. Now, once all the components are downloaded, The script also runs Meshery, starts all of the containers that run Meshery. By the way, Meshery does require Docker to be installed on your laptop, on your desktop, wherever you run it on. If you're not installing it straight to your cluster, and that's not what we're doing here. And once Meshery starts, it already opens in our browser. You can see that it's already configured to work with the Kubernetes cluster that's taken from my original kubectl context. Yeah, you can see it right here. That's my cluster on the IBM cloud. And this is Meshery. So what we have on Meshery here, we first of all see the connection status. We can see all of the active adapters running. We can see the adapters on the left-hand side too. You can see that we currently have an adapter for console from HashiCorp for Istio. That's probably the market leader in service meshes today. For network service mesh, which is a totally different kind of a mesh, and for Octarine and Citrix, but today we will be talking about Linkerd. So if we go to Linkerd, we will see that there are 3 boxes here, and we want the leftmost box that allows us to deploy a service mesh on our cluster. Now, before deploying the service mesh, we'll notice that up here it says namespace default. So by default, Meshery will deploy anything that you tell it to deploy into the default namespace. We don't want this today, because if you've ever tried playing with Linkerd, you'll understand that Linkerd expects its components to be deployed to the Linkerd namespace, and that's exactly what we want Meshery to do here. By the way, if you think we should, when installing Linkerd, ignore whatever the namespace definition here says and still deploy it to the Linkerd namespace, please comment under this video, or maybe you'll want to join Layer 5, the community. The links will be under the video, and then you can actually open issues and maybe provide pull requests and help us with the community effort. That would be very, very nice and very great for us and for you too. So let's finally deploy Linkerd to our cluster. We're deploying latest version of Linkerd. Meshery is working by default with the Edge release of Linkerd, which is the newest, the most risky, and maybe not totally production-oriented version of Linkerd. Once we hit the deployment button, we can look at what Meshery is doing in the background by running the mesheryctl logs command in order to see what is happening there. What is Meshery actually doing? Now, the way Meshery deploys Linkerd in the background is actually by, first of all, downloading the Edge release of the Linkerd binary. And then, with the help of this binary, it creates all of the deployment YAML files that it needs to deploy Linkerd into our cluster. This can take some time, depends on the bandwidth of your internet connection. For me, it usually takes something like 2-3 minutes. So I'll pause the video and come back to you when the installation resumes. So here we can see that Meshery is already creating the resources that need to be created in order for Linkerd to start working. And once we stop seeing these long messages coming from the Meshery Linkerd adapter, and that's probably now, we can go back to Meshery and see there's a notification here saying Linkerd has been deployed successfully. Wonderful. If we go back to our console, we can see that kubectl, that there's a new namespace called Linkerd in our cluster. Yeah, right here. and we will see what the pods are in that namespace. And here they all are, and they're all running, which means Linkerd has been deployed successfully. Now that we have Linkerd running, we want to have an application that proxy the traffic for, and that Linkerd can help us analyze and control. So we'll go back to Meshery. Meshery allows us to install sample applications. It's, as we said, a service mesh playground. So we can go and deploy the Emojibot application, one of the sample applications that is created by the Linkerd team. Now you'll notice that what I did here is wrong because I didn't change the namespace. So the application is now deployed to the Linkerd namespace. Now, you know what the problem with that is? Well, the problem is that whatever is deployed to Linkerd namespace doesn't get the Linkerd proxy injected inside of the pods that are deployed. Let's see how this looks. You see, all the Emojibot pods here have only one container inside them. They don't have the proxies inside them. So instead of fighting with this and injecting the Linkerd proxy containers, we'll just go and remove the Emojibot application. And then we'll change the namespace. We'll just deploy the application to the Emojivoto namespace, named the same as the application itself. Makes sense, right? So we'll go and deploy Emojivoto to the Emojivoto namespace. We'll make sure that it has been deployed. Here are all our pods, and we'll also see what services have been created here. Okay, and we can see that our web service is right here. It expects to have a load balancer. This cluster doesn't have load balancers enabled. So instead, we'll just port forward to it to see the application in action. So we'll do kubectl port forward, and our namespace is called Emojivoto. Emojivoto, right? And we'll port forward from port 88 on our computer to port 80 of the service. And we'll go to that URL in our browser, and it takes some time to load. But here we are. Okay, we have the emojis. We can choose an emoji, and we voted for it. And we can choose this emoji and see how the votes for it go up, and choose this emoji again and see that the votes for it has gone up more and more, and vote a little bit more and see that there is an error when we click on the bagel, and that's by design, and then vote on the dollar emoji and see that its ranking also went up. Now, why are we voting? Why are we doing all this? Because we now see that we can use the Linkerd command line utility and see the status for the traffic that Linkerd has captured in our applications. So we can see that most of the requests going to the web are successful. All of the requests going to the emoji backend are successful, but the voting up only has 80% success, and that is all by design. Okay, basically that was to show that Linkerd has been working. Now, in order to show you that Linkerd is actually working, we'll also do kubectl port forward to the Linkerd There's a Linkerd web UI running in the Linkerd namespace. What's wrong? Okay. I didn't specify the namespace, right? Okay. And we can actually go and open the Linkerd web interface. Here it is. And we can see the Emojiwatt namespace, and here are all the services of the Emojiwatt application. And we have all of these stats right here. And here are all the pods of the Emojiwatt application. And we can see that Linkerd comes pre-installed with Grafana. And we can easily open that by clicking on the Grafana icon. So everything is working, Linkerd is working, it's monitoring traffic. We won't dive deeper into how to use Linkerd and how to configure it in order to start managing our services with the Linkerd service mesh. For that, look out for the next video. And it was fun having you here. Take some time to load Grafana. My internet connection is not that fast today. Anyway, I hope this helped you learn about Meshery and about Linkerd. Here's Grafana, and we can see that Linkerd is sending all of the data to Grafana, and we have graphs for all of the things that have been happening inside the application, and that's without any configuration. As we said, Linkerd works with minimum configuration. Thank you for watching, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Bye-bye.